Welcome back to the Carp Chronicles podcast. This episode has been a long time coming, and I do apologise about that. I know many of you have been really looking forward to part 2 of Bill Cottam, and I'll be honest, we've had a few technicalities that we've had to work through, not only on this episode, but us as a podcast in general. So I apologise, everything's been a little bit quiet from us, but I can assure you that we will be more regular going forward. Now, before we jump into this episode, I want to announce to you that our long-awaited flavour range is finally finished. We're kicking things off with 3 different flavours. I won't go into details now, but you can check them out on our website, which is baitbros.co.uk. That's bait, B-A-I-T, bros, B-R-O-S.co.uk. These flavours are something that we've worked on extensively. They're completely exclusive to us. They're a blend of different compound flavours as well as an essential oil. So all 3 of our first flavours that we have, they all contain an essential oil. So you don't actually need to add one. You can do, but we would recommend just leaving them as they are. They've been tweaked and primed to be as efficient as they possibly can be. So try not to tamper with them too much. Pop them in, follow the instructions, and I think you're going to be really, really happy with them. So you can check those out, baitbros.co.uk. Lastly, before we click into this episode with Bill Cottam, obviously we are brought to you by Carp Hunter Giveaways. Check those guys out. As always, they are absolutely awesome. They've always got prize draws going on, and they're very affordable to enter into. So please check them out, carphuntergiveaways.co.uk. With that being said, please enjoy this episode with the one and only Bill Cottam.
To me, if you're going to fish an alternative, it needs to be as radically different to your feed bait as you can get. So, I mean, most of the feed baits I've used in the last 5 or 6 years was originally Trigger, and now is the formula from RG baits. They're both a very similar colour, like a typical fish mealy brown colour. And I like to use white or yellow over the top of that. A yellow spicy one does very, very well for me. But I think it's like all this stuff. It's sort of it's confidence. I carry a bag around with me that has an assortment of alternative hook baits in it, and I just look in it and think, that's the one for me today. But it's invariably a white one. Invariably white. I think white's a terrific colour. Absolutely terrific colour. In answer to can they blow, yes, they can. I mean, anything that sort of smacks you in the face like that. But it's all a bit of a mystery, all this, because if you look at the rig boys, you know, you've got to use a green lead because they spook on it if they can see it. You've got to use green tubing because if they can see it, they'll spook on it. You've got to use a swivel that don't glint too much in the sun because if they see it, they'll spook on it. You've got to camouflage your hook length because if they see it, they spook on it. Then you put a yellow bait on because that attracts them.
It's a weird one, isn't it?
It's all a bit of a mystery. I think so much of this is in our own minds. But I mean, I got to the nth degree to camouflage my rigs and then put a white bait on the end because I think it might attract them. So it's a difficult one. But in answer to your question, I mean, the waters I fish are pressured by European standards, but that doesn't make them quite receiving anything like the sort of pressure that a Wellington Park does or something like that. I mean, yes, all the mainstreams are taken the vast majority of the time, but it sees a lot of different approaches. Whereas, you know, your sort of top circuit waters in the UK, I can see it. It's not a tactic I'd use on a water like that. I mean, that's not to say that French carp are easy to catch because all that went out the window about 20 years ago. I mean, I think if you can get on first on one of these waters, maybe, but that applies in the UK as well.
Yeah.
But some of these pressured French waters now receive an unbelievable amount of pressure. So, yes, it will come, but I don't think they're blowing on many European waters yet.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just down to conditioning of the animal, isn't it? It doesn't matter if they're in France or England. It's how they're
Yeah.
conditioned, you know.
I mean, I would never claim to be an expert on rigs by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of my fishing is done with snowman rigs. And I think if you've got two baits of different sizes, two baits of different buoyancies on quite a lengthy hair, I think that creates a problem for them to get rid of it, as opposed to just a single round bottom bait. I mean, I use square baits quite a lot, both on the hook and for freebies.
Yeah.
And I think they are very difficult for them to get rid of.
Yeah, if you look at carp in a tank or in a pond, just if you can view them up close like that, you watch them spit out something that's like, just like clamp down on the rolling table, so it's kind of like an oblong shape, like a pillow, something like that.
Yeah.
Or a square bait. It's not coming out as easy as a perfectly round ball is it? That's for sure. And the snowman, it's similar.
It can't be.
It's an odd shape, isn't it?
You're also being different to the vast majority of people who are fishing there. I mean, I had about 40 kilos of square baits made for me a couple of years ago. And I put them on Facebook just to show people what I was doing. There's a number of people who seem to be interested. I put them on there. A lot of people thought it was a wind-up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think any way you can be different has got is generally got to be a good thing, as long as it's not bloody stupid.
Of course it has. Yeah. Of course it has. I mean, the square baits give me such confidence. I mean, they go back to the days when Tim and I were fishing together, and we used to use a bricking method. You know, where you make the bait to a 1 pound brick, cover it in cellophane and microwave it, and then carve it up into cubes. I mean, we've moved on a bit from that now, but it's the same principle, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love the square baits. But I like mixing square baits up with a couple of different sizes of round baits to keep them guessing. You know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the only reason a fish has to inspect every little item of food is if they're all exactly the same. If they're different sizes, different weights, and require a different amount of suck, if that's the right expression, they're far less likely to investigate every single morsel of food.
Yeah, and they're not going to be as suspicious if it's coming up at a different rate, you know.
No,
and I think they're probably sucking it back harder as anyway. No funny jokes there, but I think they're taking it with more gusto because, you know, they can't differentiate between a smaller one or a bigger one when they're, you know, in that feeding mode. And they don't have eyes on their nose.
No, but I mean, by using 2 kilos of identical 18 mil baits all in the swim together, I think we're making life harder for ourselves. You know, that's why I love halving baits. Some halve baits, some crush baits, some barrels, possibly some cubes, all the same recipe, but just sort of mix it all up. I think it's a massive edge.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. These alternative baits that you're using, are they, I know you mentioned snowman, are they always snowman? Do you use pop-ups at all or not?
I do use pop-ups, I had a couple of 3 years where I hardly use them at all, but I have been using them quite a bit lately. And they seem to do quite well where I'm fishing at the minute. I mean, I fish them very, very low to the ground. So, again, I'm not an expert, but when you've got a pop-up on a multi-rig or something like that that's maybe an inch off the bottom, and you've got the size of fish that I'm hoping to catch, the size of fish that I'm targeting, whether they could twig there off the bottom, I don't know. You know, when it's only an inch off the bottom, the eyes are on the sort of top of the head with a 60-plus fish. I just can't see that coming up and thinking, oh, look, that one's a little bit off the bottom. I just don't buy it. I just think the joy of a pop-up is your hook's not masked by any debris on the bottom. Your hook's clean, the presentation's clean. And I think when they pick it up and move off, you've got what is definitely a bare hook, as opposed to it being around a little twig or a little bit of debris or something like that. So I think there's a lot to be said for it. I mean, I'm not a fan of 2.5 inch or 3 inch pop-ups, anything like that, but when they're just nicely off the bottom, I think it's a great presentation for sort of hooking.
Yeah, I think everything just happens a bit quicker as well, doesn't it? It's already part up off the floor, and it's going to turn quicker, and they're going to tighten up the hook length quicker, in theory. So yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense with the hook baits. I mean, did you ever used to knock up your own and add anything like DMPT, astaxanthin, anything a bit fringe on them or not?
Yeah, not so much. I used to make my own, or the guys at work used to make them for me, and I used to boost flavour levels, boost a few bits and pieces. But most of my alternative hook baits are boosted with liquids as opposed to additives in the bait.
Okay. Is this hydrolysates or essential oils or something else?
It tends to mirror what's in the bait. I will tend to use possibly a hydroslate of some description with the matching flavour that's in the bait in it. And I've got baits that have been in soak for 15 years, and they're absolutely rock hard. They literally can't absorb anymore. And they're just brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any particular hydro that you're impressed with now? Obviously, the well-loved L030 is no longer, isn't it? Is there anything?
No, I don't believe it is.
Days? No, it's not. There's quite a few new ones on the market, though. Are you a big fan of any?
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, I mean, there's a pre-digested krill kicking around that's very, very nice. A couple of the livers I like. I mean, liver's just terrific. But I mean, most of my alternative hook baits are either spicy or fruity, so they don't really lend themselves to anything like that. But I just want as much attraction as I can in that alternative hook bait,
Yeah, definitely. I think the krill hydro's gone now as well. Certainly, I
think you can still get it in smallish quantities. I think.
Can you? Okay.
I'm not sure. As I say, I've lost touch with it all a little bit. I mean, it's a lot of these products are getting harder and harder to get. But as you say, as one door closes, another one opens, and there are some very, very nice liquids about there these days.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you mentioned you're a fan of the liver products. Is that just exclusively beef liver, which is hard to get now as well, or are you into the chicken livers, the pig livers? Did you have a preference?
I think chicken and pig liver are okay, but given a choice, beef's the one. But like you say, it's very difficult to get.
Yeah, it's expensive as well, isn't it? Bloody expensive.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's going to get difficult for the bait companies, I think. I mean, Brexit's not helped in a lot of areas. A lot of flavours have been removed from the flavour suppliers lists, and it's only going to get harder, I think, sadly. There's more and more restrictions, and it's going to get difficult.
It's a bit of a worry, isn't it? Because so much of it isn't made in the UK. So it's all subject to change.
That's it.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully some good will come out of it, and perhaps we'll get some more bits and bobs manufactured by some of the UK companies. I know Bath, British Aqua Feeds, are doing some of their own stuff in-house, which is good. And hopefully some other companies.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be the way forward. I mean, a mate of mine, Dave Moore, who's involved with rolling baits, he's producing a couple of his own hydroslates now, and it's got to be the way forward, but it's not an easy thing to do.
Are they available through the Rolling Baits website?
I'm not sure if they're available as raw materials. I know they incorporate them in a couple of the baits. Whether they're available as raw materials, I'm not sure.
Right. Okay. I might have to look into that.
That's got to be done, hasn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, Dave, not only is an exceptional carp angler, he's a very, very bright fella. So it's not something, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but it ain't something that Fred in the shed's going to be doing in a hurry.
No, I understand. I understand that absolutely. Dave is he was responsible for a few of the NutriBaits mixes, wasn't he? I know he did the big fish mix. Did he have much of a role in the
Yeah,
other
he was.
mixes?
No, not particularly. I mean, he was. Me and him put big fish mix together, but it was 95% Dave, I have to say. And he's one of them fellas that I always bounce stuff off, and he was always very, very helpful, very, very sort of knowledgeable. I mean, you get people who think that being a field tester is to use the going bait on their lay, and that's not a field tester, that's a sponsored angler.
Yeah.
You know, people like Dave Moore and Ken Townley were out and out field testers. You could give them something with no history to it, no idea whether it's going to be any good or not, and they'd go and use it. Not twice, they'd go and sit behind it. And that's what, there's not so many people prepared to do that. You know, I mean, when it comes off and you're the first to get your hands on a special product, it's great. But I would think certainly the additives that we tested at NutriBase, probably 1 in 20 saw the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is the true sort of field testers are going to be spending a lot of time sat behind something that's not as good as they could be using straight off the shelf. But if you're gonna field test something properly, that's the way it has to be.
100%. I've said this in other podcasts. It's not fun testing different things. It really isn't, because, like you say, you haven't got a bloody
Well, it's either great. It's either great. No, you haven't. It's either great or it's incredibly frustrating, because you might be using something that takes a while to get going. Yeah. It might never get going, and potentially they could have wasted a summer. Definitely. So that is a special type of angler, a special type of sponsored angler. Because, I mean, we used to get phone calls all day long when I had NutriBase. I want to be a field tester. Nobody's using trigger on my lake. That ain't a field tester, is it? No. That's somebody who wants some bait. That's somebody who wants some bait.
Yeah, and I think even that's changed now. I think these people that get bait deals, they call themselves consultants. I don't do any bloody consulting whatsoever. You know, they just get slightly cheaper bait.
The problem you've got now, the problem you've got now is catching fish ain't going to impress anybody anymore. It's all been done. It's all been caught. You know, how many times a year do you go on social media, see a fish and your mouth drops out? If you go back to the 90s, it used to be quite regular. Yeah. But now we've all been impressed by fish captures as much as we can, and it's consistency is great. It's the consistent anglers that I always respect, rather than the kid who catches one sort of big one every 5 years. But the wow factor from catching 10-30s a year has gone, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. Sadly. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and you look at companies like Mainline who know their onions. He don't need consultants, does he?
Definitely not.
He needs people to promote the brand and provide pictures and show people what it catches. They don't need telling how to put a bait together. So the word consultant is a bit of a stretch, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's to put it lightly, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. Pete, you got anything to add to what we were just talking about? Hook baits and hydrolysates, different things like that?
I was going to jump in with the hydro thing, because I know there's a lot of guys making their own at the moment. But for me, it's sort of one of those things where I just can't imagine you could get consistency in batches. I can imagine any batch you create yourself in a shed, there would always be difference in consistency.
I think he'll tell you better than me. I think that's Dave's problem.
Right. Okay.
You know, if anybody can do it, he will. But it's I don't know too much about what's involved, but I know enough to know it's not an exact science.
No, that's it.
It's a difficult process.
And I think you need to do it on a big scale anyway. It's laboratory conditions, isn't it? You need
ideally, yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say is you mentioned colours blowing, Bill. I was going to ask you with sort of high attract hook baits and things whilst we were on the topic. What are your thoughts on flavours blowing or essential oils flavours? Or do you see it as more of a colour thing?
I think with flavours and additives, I think it's all about inclusion rates. I mean, if you take black pepper, at a sensible low level, its catching life is endless, really. It just goes on and on and on. You put it in too high, and it will blow. I mean, so many people and so many commercially available baits are just way, way over the top in terms of smell level for me. I'm not talking so much about alternative hook baits, but for your feed bait, your long-term food baits, there's a big argument that says you don't need any flavours or essential oils in them.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Sam, we've discussed this before, haven't we? How we've gone from a part of our sort of our bait making, we used to make it together where we wouldn't touch a flavour, and we were paranoid to me now, especially. I fish sort of 10, 12-hour sessions, and whilst I'm sort of trickling bait in all the time, I like to have a little bit of flavour in there. If I can get certain flavours, it's confidence, isn't it, behind your rods?
I think so, but I mean, as I mentioned in the first podcast, the key is to pick the baits that suits your style of fishing. Because everybody's style of fishing is different. And if you're fishing the same lake 4 days a week, you don't need a flavour. You just need a good quality base mix with perhaps a liquid food in there. If you're dotting about here, there, and everywhere, an evening there, a day there, a morning there, then you need to boost it with some inbuilt attraction, and it's not going to blow. So it's all about sitting down and thinking, right, what do I want from my bait? How do I best achieve it?
Have you got any ingredients that you'd use where you think you could use at high inclusion levels for forever, and you'd be confident they wouldn't blow?
I don't think greenlit mussel would blow. I mean, obviously there is an upper limit, but at the levels we've used it at, up to sort of 10, 12 grams a pound or half a kilo in new money, I don't think that'll blow. I mean, 100% natural products, unless you go absolutely ridiculous, shouldn't blow. Essential oils shouldn't blow unless you go absolutely ridiculous. But the problem a lot of people have with essential oils, the time-served bait boys get it. They get it that to get the best out of geranium oil, you haven't got to be able to smell it from 3 swims down the bank. But you guys who've used Richworth Tutti Frutti or whatever bait that's quite sort of pokey on the nose, they find it hard to switch to a supple bait, and as a consequence, they put more in than they need to. And that is the kiss of death with essential oil.
That's it. Geranium oil. That's one I've not used for a long time.
That's a good geranium oil. Really, really good smell. When I first travelled down to Darrenth, when we were just sort of on the verge of forming new baits, and I thought Tim and myself knew more about bait than anybody on the planet until I arrived at Darrenth, and they were all about 5 years in front of us. And geranium oil was one of the big ones there, without a doubt.
That's it. And Buchu as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Have you? I don't know if we discussed this on the last one. I don't think we did. Have you got much experience with Buchu or the skunk oil?
None at all.
No.
None at all.
No, I shan't ask you for comment then.
Well, he's caught a few fish, no doubt about that. But no, it's not one. It's not one we've ever used. We used quite a few extensively that never saw the light of day. We used patchouli oil quite a bit that was very, very floral. It's like a lot of essential oils. It's very inconsistent. did remarkably well on some places and nothing at all on others, which, as a commercial bait company, that's no good. You know, you've got to go with the things that are good across a wide range of waters.
Mm-hmm. And that's it. And before I sort of pass back over to Sam, because I know he's got a long line of questions for you, Bill. You sort of said that was that patchouli oil?
Patchouli, yeah.
Patchouli,
it was one of the old hippies used to wear in the 70s. Used to smell really, really floral, and not really like I always think a carp bait should smell.
Mm-hmm.
But it did work quite well. It worked well.
Yeah, that's one I've jotted that down. I will I'll do some reading on that one.
Yeah.
Was there any other sort of essential oils you were exploring with that sort of struck a note with you, but perhaps never made it into commercial sort of bait production?
I did quite well for a while on borage. I mean, I don't think it went on. I think it died a death pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when we launched the full range of essentials, I think we had 30 or 31 of them in the NutriBase range.
Oh wow!
And I think that covered most of them. I mean, some were just impossible for financial reasons.
Yes.
I mean, with essential oils and products like that, it's not just the price. If the price is high, like it was with asafoetida oil, and you only want 1 drop per pound or 1 drop a kilo, the price is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
But if the price is high and you want 3 mils a kilo, then the price becomes a big problem, because your punter's going to have to buy in 40 mil bottles or something like that, and that makes it ridiculous. Whereas asafoetida, we used to sell it in 10 mil bottles, and it'd last the customer forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you sort of alluded to before, it's you certainly never cut your products. You always sold them as they came to you.
Yeah, the only one we cut was a version of the leek oil that we advertised that we cut, because everybody was trying to get less than a drop in, which obviously you couldn't do without cutting it.
Yeah, and that was one that you said you sort of you used to use almond oil as a good base.
Yeah, we cut it with almond. Yeah.
It's interesting you say about the patchouli. I must have every bloody essential oil next to me. I went on a purchasing rampage. I've got a test. It's a pond in my garden. I've got all sorts of things going on. Patchouli's one of those ones that just didn't. I mean, I've read about it and it being used in times gone by, but it's not something that my fish particularly took to. So it's interesting you say that.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It took some waters apart, then it did nothing at all on others. It was very, very weird.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Did you ever, I'll tell you one that's got some interesting properties on paper. Did you ever play around with wintergreen at all?
We had samples. We never sort of went any further than that.
That's one of the few ones I haven't tried, but on paper it's got some interesting points to it, for sure.
I'll tell you what's a really, really underrated essential oil, and that's fennel.
Yeah.
That's a fabulous essential oil. Yeah. Absolutely fabulous.
Did you use, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but cajeput?
And again, we had samples of dozens and dozens and dozens. And, and you couldn't try them all. But again, I'm familiar with it, but no, we never used
it. Okay. Perfect. Just whilst we're on the note of essential oils, you wrote before about emulsifying essential oils. I think you even sold an emulsifier at one point, didn't you? Is that
we
something?
Did, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, in my mind, it's I've never worried about it because I'm adding it to eggs, which have emulsification properties, and often with a flavor as well, which generally they help with the emulsifying. Do you think a dedicated emulsifier is needed or not so much?
The problem is the emulsifiers. I mean, the emulsifier that we used to sell was glycerol based.
Yeah.
The emulsifiers that truly have emulsification properties that will make a difference are ones that you don't really want to be putting in a carpet. That's the problem. I mean, there's an emulsifier that called sodium lauryl sulfate, which is an unbelievable emulsifier, but it's not something I'd want to include in a carpet.
No.
You know, I can't pretend that we never did, because we did. But the more we looked into it, the more we thought, although we're using tiny amounts, you know, you don't really want to be using this. But I'm not sure how valid it is. You know, a lot of people used to say to me, oh, I put the essential oil in the fridge. If it thickens, that needs emulsifying. Well, cinnamon oil used to go very, very viscous in a fridge, but it didn't need emulsifying. I think it's, well, like you say, eggs are terrific emulsifier. You know, and I think that's sufficient, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Last sort of point on essential oils. I think a lot of people are interested in this. We've spoken about essential oils on so many different podcasts, and this is a question that keeps coming up. And you're probably, you know, the best guy we could ask about it. When average Joe public are trying to choose an essential oil that's going to work. I mean, we mentioned on the, you know, earlier about the cassia essential oil on part one. And you said, you know, some of them are just different gravy to others. How can average Joe public go about choosing an essential oil that's high quality, or is it literally just a case of trial and error?
It's difficult because it doesn't say this is high quality or this is crap on the bottle, does it? I mean, to me, I don't know how many bake companies sell essential oils these days, but I would always try and buy from a bake company and buy from one that you trust implicitly, which again is difficult. But and a basic sort of rule of thumb, if you see, I mean, there are exceptions. I like to think you get what you pay for. If you see a black pepper oil for £3 for 20 ml, it can't happen. You know, not with proper black pepper oil. No. So, you know, if something sort of sounds a bit too good to be true price-wise, there's a fair bet that it is. But I don't know how popular essential oils are at the minute. I mean, we went back to the mid-90s, we used to sell enormous quantities. But as we mentioned in the first part, everybody's using pretty much the same sort of style of bait now. But the potential of it, I mean, I'm a huge fan of them. I think the potential of essential oils is endless.
Definitely, and they're not popular now. Like, there's not many companies.
No, I don't think they are.
No,
I don't think they are. I mean, towards the end of my time at Nutribase, so I don't know what's sort of happening now. We had the same old 4 or 5 that sold big quantities. You know, your black peppers, your garlics, your clove. Apart from that, it was horsework, and it never used to be. But if you go back, as I think we mentioned in the first podcast, if you go back 25 years and you'd get 20 people on a lake, probably 5 would be using fish meals, 5 would be using bird food with fruit flavours, a couple would be using milk proteins with essential oils. Now, everybody's using the same type of bait. And I think there's fewer and fewer people rolling their own bait. So unless you give it to a trusted bait rolling company, you're buying bait straight out the freezer, straight off the shelf, and it's got in it what it's got in it. I mean, how many people do what we used to do and make bait up in the kitchen or in the garage or whatever? I don't know anymore. Not as many, that's for sure.
Definitely not as many. No, definitely not. I mean, and here's the thing, right? Let's say you're getting, I think you mentioned this before, actually. Let's just say you're getting a good solid fish meal bait. I mean, what it's going to have 8-10% pre-digested, maybe 20 to 30% LT94. A lot of them are very similar, and it's the little bits that are different. It's mostly the same thing.
Yeah, bit of liver, bit of robin red. Yeah,
bit of liver, bit of robin red, maybe some brewer's yeast as well. It's all very, very samey, isn't it? Do you think
Yep.
A different flavor or essential oil is a chance to differentiate baits between the others? Or do you think actually you're better off going for like a bird food or a high pro milk or something like that?
I think the problem with fish meal baits, I think they're so effective once fish get on a good bird food bait, or a bait that contains a good percentage of bird food in its makeup. I think they get pretty much preoccupied on the bird food, on the fish meal concept. So I think if you're going to go in with another comparable quality fish meal bait, you're going to catch your share. If you try and go against the grain and go in with a yellow bird food that smells of cranberry or whatever, I think you've got a bit of a battle on your hands, if I'm honest. The problem is a lot of these waters now, they see so much fish meal that it's hard to get onto anything else.
See, that's the quandary, isn't it? For the home bait maker, do you just stick with the going thing that actually they're just seeing as natural food, or do you roll the dice and go for something completely freaking different? That's the question you got to ask, isn't it?
I think it very much depends where you're fishing. I mean, if you're fishing a lake where one bait dominates that lake, if I was going to go out on a limb and do something different, I'd try and go and produce a higher track bait, because you're not going to compete with the amount of that feed bait that's going in. So I would look at something like Enervite or something with a lot of inbuilt attraction, because you're not going to compete with what's happening on there. You can't.
No.
I mean, a lot of these lakes in England and in France to a certain extent, I think people have seen what happens when you feed a lake with pellet, perhaps through the winter, through the autumn. So they've got fish meal in them as well, although the vast majority have. So they're feeding fish meal, the lake holders feeding fish meal. The punters then come and buy the house pellet. They use them in conjunction with fish meal bait, and it's just bombarded with fish meal. So if you're just little Bobby on your own with a milk protein or a nut mix, and everybody else is shoveling and the sort of fish meal in, you are up against it. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And I do worry. I don't really. I'm not sure it's a health issue, but I do think there's a pattern emerging with half the world using fish meal baits and winter fishing not being quite what it was.
Do you reckon?
I mean, I think last winter, I think there could be. I mean, if I go back to when I started winter carp fishing, we didn't used to catch as many. We used to catch them, and we used to catch probably the better fish in better condition. Now, there's waters in my area where I live. They go 4 months without producing a fish in winter. And you think, well, there's a lot of fish in here. It's just, you can just go for weeks on end, and it's just as if there's not a carp in there. And you do wonder if there's some connection with the sort of higher fat fish meal baits, and the reluctance from to feed in winter, whether they've got to store the protein and the fats. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think there's a pattern between waters that are bombarded with fish meals and those that stop fishing in winter.
Do you think that's because of the fish meal they see in the spring, summer, autumn, or do you think it's because people are still feeding high fish meal content baits within the winter?
I suspect it's more what they see for sort of 9 months of the year. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem in winter you using a fish meal bait, but my idea of a fish meal bait is different to other people's, because if you look at Trigger that had fish meal in it, Trigger Ice that had fish meal in it, the formula from RG that has fish meal in it, and Big Fish Mix that has fish meal in it, they're all probably 30% fish meal. Whereas a lot of these cheaper and more cheerful fish meal baits have got up to 60% in it. So I think there's fish meals and fish meals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if you go back a few years, everybody used to get as much fish meal in a bait as they could, because you could get so much for your money. You know, they were £350 a ton for years and years and years. Now they're much more than that. I suspect the amount that people are putting in has probably dropped a bit.
Yeah. Our last guest, Stephen White, his friend, sent off some different baits from well-known company, and got them analysed, and yeah, they came back pretty low in protein. I mean, I'd like to ask you, obviously not to give anything away about your old mixes, but what would you say would be the protein content of a good fish meal that was produced commercially by a company?
Well, I know what ours was, because we had everyone analysed and it was all on the packaging. And it did surprise me a little bit. Our best mixes were coming back sort of 40%.
40% protein?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you think it would be higher or lower than that?
Yes, I did. I thought it'd be a bit higher than that.
Higher, yeah. I mean, 40%, if you were to look at what is ideal for a carp, that's quite on the high side. I don't think that's low.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I just expected it to be a tad higher. But as we said in the first podcast, protein's only one bit of it.
Yes, for sure.
You know, without a doubt.
Yeah, but presumably, if the winter fishing is being affected, but presumably a lot of that is protein, right? Or are you thinking more along the lines of fat?
I think it's fat and oil.
You think it's more to do with the fat content?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's a fact.
No.
I just don't think. I mean, last winter was an exception. There seemed to be a lot of fish caught last winter, but I think there has been a bit of a pattern with the emergence of 75% of anglers, certainly 75% of food bait anglers, I would say, are using baits with fish meal in them.
Yeah,
and I think that there is a pattern with that, and the decline in the amount of fish we get in during the colder months.
Yeah. Maybe it's literally just that they are getting such good nutrition these days, all year round.
Yeah, I think that's it.
They perhaps don't need to. It might not even be a bad thing, mightn't it? For the fish.
No, I'm not saying it is. I just think there's a pattern with fish meal baits.
Yeah.
For sort of 9 months of the year.
Yeah.
And a decline in winter fishing.
No, definitely. It's interesting. In terms of a winter bait, I mean, do you subscribe to the fact that, keep the protein fairly high, make it from milks that generally absorbs better in the gut tract with the low enzyme count? What are your thoughts on a winter bait? If you were to formulate, your go-to winter bait, how would you do it? What would you be focusing on?
I think digestibility is massive.
Mm-hmm.
A bait that's lower in fat would always be my choice. Some wheat germ would always be my choice. But I think the main thing, and people miss it, I think, is certain attractors have a fantastic track record in cold water, and some don't. And you can have the best attractor in the world in summer, and it might not happen in winter. So you've got to look back at the history of it all. What additives have produced the goods in winter in the past? There's certain flavours, certain essential oils that have an unbelievable track record in cold water. you've got to go down that route. And again, as I mentioned in the first podcast, pick the phone up or Skype or email, right, whatever you do, and ask the bait companies. If they're a bait company worth the salt, they want you to be really successful with their products. So, and if they don't know which ones are their products that are effective in winter, you want to bring the next bait company up, because they should do.
Definitely.
I mean, when I had NutriBase, I could point you to 10 products that were exceptional in cold weather, either individually or used in combination with one another. And that's where you point people. I mean, clove oil, black pepper oil, cream flavors, juniper oil, fennel oil. Got a fantastic track record in cold water. So why would you look any further?
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, do you? It's already been.
No, you don't. You don't. I mean, so many people make this bait game so complicated. And to me, you want to unless you really enjoy it, like you two guys obviously do, let the bait companies do the hard work.
Yeah.
By producing a good winter bait, a good autumn bait, a good year-round bait. And you just mold it to suit your needs. I mean, you get additives that are very instant. You get additives that need a bit of pre-baiting. It goes back to what I said. You've got to pick what suits you.
Definitely. Yeah, you're 100% right.
It's so important. And there is, let's be honest, I've been messing about with bait since I was about 19. There is no magic answer, is there? You're never going to come up with this bait that a carp can't swim past, and without sort of picking it up. The only thing you can do is stack the odds in your favour all the time. And the golden rule: pick what suits you, have the courage of your convictions, and stick with it. The answer is not to change to Fred Bloggs' bait because the guy on the opposite bank did well on that bait last week. Don't change flavour to cranberry because the bloke next door had torn cranberry and you black. Pick your bait, stick with it, believe in it.
That's the thing, isn't it? And I mean, as into bait as I am and Pete is, we're fully passionate about it. It hampers your angling, because let's say you're 100% confident in a bait, 100% confident in your hook baits, you're confident in your rigs. Where is your energy going? It's going into finding the fish and unpiecing the other parts of the puzzle, which I think are really, really important.
Of course.
It makes sense. It makes absolute sense, and it's like you said before.
It's like confidence. We said about all this experimenting is okay. It's great fun. But it's like we said about the field testing, and like Ken Townley had a wonderful expression about field testing. He says it's not all beer and Skittles, and it ain't. So, I mean, if you want to take the safe route, pick a bait pick a bait that's got a track record, and you can take that bit out of the equation almost. I mean, a lot of people, you said to me, what bait are you using last year and this year? And I'd said the same one I used last year. I mean, I used the identical trigger recipe for about 12 seasons. And I used to feel like, sort of when I did the exhibitions, I used to feel like it's not what they want to hear this. What bait are you using this year, Bill? Same as I used last year, same as I used year before, same as I used year before that. And some of them don't want to hear that. But, a good bait has an unbelievably long catching life. And very often, if it does start to slow, it's because you've caught too many. And the only thing you need to do is have a couple of weekends introducing it, perhaps blanking or getting your location wrong and not hooking on it. And it's back to where you were. But a good quality bait with balanced ingredients and a sensible label shouldn't blow. Really shouldn't.
No. Did you ever enter into the realms of, perhaps lower nutritional base, but it moves through the fish quick and it's got some attractive things in it?
Yeah, I mean, Enovite didn't have the food value that Big Fish Mix or Trigger or High Nouveau had. It was a different sort of concept, but it was absolutely packed with attractors and natural attractors for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's all horses for courses now.
Yeah, definitely. Your something along those lines was the cream Kajauza. You brought those out in a ready-made, didn't you? That
Yes,
did
we
quite
did.
well.
We did.
Yeah, and I know. Well, please tell me if I'm wrong. I think that was not as high a food value as some of your other ones, right?
No, I mean, the nature of a ready-made, generally speaking, is that it's an attractor bait more than a food bait. So
yeah.
Your nutritional value is lower, your inbuilt attraction is higher.
Yeah.
But again, it's like we said, pick what suits you. If you're flitting about here, there, and everywhere, you're not going to get the benefit of the food value of a Trigger or a Formula or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you just need something with pulling power, and that's what ready-mades tend to have.
Yeah, definitely. It certainly caught a lot of fish in winter as well.
Yeah, it's a great smell. I mean, that's another fabulous winter smell.
I mean, part of it has got to be people want to buy a bag of that because it smells amazing, and then more people are using it.
Yeah.
So it catches more. There's got to be an element of that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, when we used to do the exhibitions, we used to have all the baits open on the front. Yeah. And every time somebody picked up the cream Kajauza, you knew they were going to buy some.
Yeah, you got it.
which is nonsense, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
but,
oh God, yeah.
But it was a great carp catcher as well. It still is.
Yeah, it's the same as the Richworth Tootie. I know some people disagree with me. I really think there was something in that was really special. I mean, I did really well on that, as many people did. The Esterberry as well.
Listen, bad baits don't catch that many carp.
No.
They
and
don't.
I mean, no, I think it had a fair amount of sugar in it. It had the flavor in it. I probably had some milks in it as well, but whether it was high, what we would now class as high nutritional value or not, it doesn't freaking matter, does it? It was something that carp definitely wanted to.
I think it was probably mid-protein, in fairness, but I just think they like it, don't they? There's often no more to it than that. They just love that smell.
Yeah.
And when you've got people like Lee Jackson saying it's one of the best baits he's ever used, you've got to listen.
Well, most definitely. Mm-hmm.
It's but there's something, as I've just said, bad quality baits and baits that don't attract carp don't have a track record like the Richworth Tootie. They just don't.
No, definitely not. Do you think it was literally just that flavor was something else, or do you think there's something else that they were putting in?
I don't know. I tend to think it was just a fabulous smell. It was unlike any other Tootie. I mean, every bait company's got a Tootie, but that was unlike any one I've ever come across.
Yeah, that was a Campbell's flavour, wasn't it?
Yeah, it caught, I believe so, yeah. It caught so many carp that. You just can't argue with it.
No. You had a I don't know if it was Wonder Fruit or something. Did you have an equivalent of the Tutti flavour? Yeah.
No, we had a Tutti Frutti, which in honesty was a poor imitation of Richworth's.
Right. Okay.
Or Stream Selects, whatever they are. But no, the Wonder Fruit was a blend of fruits, but wasn't Tutti at all.
Right. Okay. And Tim Paisley wrote it somewhere, and this was spoken about on a forum actually not so long ago, and I knew it anyway, but now I've forgotten it. He spoke about adding an essential oil to a flavor base, and that then became one of your flavors? He was fishing a match where I think it was Bob was fishing as well, so he presumed they were fishing Tootie. Do you know the story I'm on about?
Yes, he's on about Fruit Special.
Fruit Special, that was it.
Yeah, which was an in-house blend of a couple of fruits, a couple of essential oils, one of the cajousers, molasses. Again, just a great smell.
I had a
great smell.
I had a bottle of that, and it did smell amazing. Yeah, it did. One of those ones.
It is. It's a terrific smell.
Yeah, very nice. You had the Jaffa essential oil, didn't you? Did you think much of that? The orange essential oil?
Not as much as some of the others. I mean, he did well enough, but it's no black pepper or clove.
No. We recently had someone on called Dean Towie, who you might not be familiar with. He wrote in Cartworld a bit, and
I know the name.
He's clued up on. He's very clued up on bait, and he mentioned the sweet orange essential oil on the first episode, and it's become, the amount of messages we still get on that is absolutely insane, and it's just really blown up sort of in the bait world and on the forums. It's incredible, but there's definitely some better ones that I've tested for sure.
It's a funny one. I mean, we never did great with it at Nutribaits, but we used to sell it in bulk to a couple of the other bait companies that were using it in their ready roll baits.
Right. Interesting. It's one of those, isn't it? Different things are different to different people, aren't they? It's your experience, and
Yeah. Just going off topic a second. The guy who did the last podcast for you, what was his name?
The last one that we published was Stephen White.
Is he the guy with that scaly thing? You've got a scaly thing on your Facebook page.
Yeah. When was this posted? Just like literally a couple of days ago.
Oh, yeah. Yes. He's on with a heavily scaled mirror. What a fish that is.
Yeah.
Goodness, that's from me.
Yeah, from Acton Burnell, that is.
Is it really?
It is, yeah.
What a fabulous fish that is. It blew me away, that.
It kind of looks like a foreign fish to me.
I don't care whether it's from Mars. It's just fabulous.
Yeah. That's Stephen. He's done pretty well up on Acton, I think.
Sounds like it. Yeah. How big's that fish then?
I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you.
Not that it matters.
No, I have 40 plus, I think.
What a fish that. Goodness me.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, he catches a few, Stephen does. He really does. He's got some interesting theories on bait and attracting different fish, and he's an interesting guy. I hope to get him back on, to be honest. But yeah, cracking fish.
Some people have just got that knack, haven't they?
They have. Yeah. And do you know what? I don't think he'll mind me saying. He might do. He might send me a shitty text, but he hasn't actually been carp angling that long in the grand scheme of it all. Considering he's catching those fish, I think around about 15 years. But the knowledge he's now managed to accumulate in those 15 years is phenomenal. He knows his onions when it comes to catching them, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just think some people have got that little bit, something special about them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on the last one, you briefly mentioned Terry Hearn. He's on it, isn't he? He's not half-arsing anything.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's got to be it's work ethic and a little bit of natural talent. Got to be, right?
I don't know what he's doing, but it's totally different than what I'm doing. I'll tell you that. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But when you watch his interviews and read his stuff, he just infuses it, doesn't he? He's just fabulous.
You can't watch his stuff and not be drawn in, can you? There's something about him as a person. And it's not just I don't think it's just that we know what he's caught. I think if you didn't know who the hell he was and you listened to him, you'd be like, oh shit, that guy's passionate, There's something about him, isn't there?
There's a lot of people caught a lot of big fish these days, But he's just he's what I like in a carp angler. He seems to approach it in the right way. Perhaps I'm a bit old school. I don't like all this shouting and roping, and he just seems to, the way he approaches his fishing is just how it should be for me.
Yeah. Proper angler and a proper gentleman, isn't he? Or at least he seems
And he's one of them. I've just written in Carpology about these all-rounders. And I'm sure if he had the mindset to do it, he could do it easily. But these guys who, if I concentrate on one water in a year, be it in England, be it in France or whatever, I'm quietly confident I can do okay. You look at some of these guys, they're catching big fish of 6, 7 different species in a year. And you just think, how do you do that? You know, it's just, they're the anglers for me.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's not that hard in this day and age to sit there long enough on the right water until you get a couple, is it?
I don't think so. No. And I think there's...
You sort of need the mindset to do it.
Yeah.
And you need no job and the funds to do it and all that, but it's not... That's not what you do, don't you? But it's not like catching 5 or 6 species of big fish in a year.
No.
That just blows me away.
I mean, I think there is such thing as a natural angler. I mean, if you look at, this is sea fishing, so I know it's a bit different from coarse fishing. If you see me bass fishing, it's something I did for several years. I am absolutely shit at it. I can't catch bass for shit.
No.
I'm awful. Pete, used to rip the piss out of me. Pete can catch bass. I cannot, for whatever reason, and I understand angling, obviously, but bass, no, I just can't catch them. Yet there's other people, it just seems they can turn their hand to any species and they'll catch them. That definitely isn't me.
Yeah, I think there's also styles of fishing that suits particular people.
Yeah.
Maybe. You know, session fishing undoubtedly suits me. You know, a wander down the river with a waggler doesn't. You know, so it's everybody has different skills, don't they? And I think you've got to adopt the tactics that you think you're reasonably good at.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's people like Chris Yates who obviously set a record, fishing fairly unconventionally compared to what was starting to come out of the woodwork, and still, you definitely caught his fair share. So it's an interesting phenomena, isn't it? Yeah.
But I've probably met 7, 8, 10 people in my life who you look at and think he got something a bit special.
Yeah.
You know, they're not all sort of household names by any stretch of the imagination. No. But there is just a few people. But that's the same at golf, at tennis, at football, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah. You just get people who are naturally exceptional at it, who don't have to work at it. But if you get one of them, like Terry, who works at it bloody hard as well, then, he's on to a winner.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, different breed, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Switching gears back onto bait, which is our sort of comfort zone on this podcast. We mentioned enzymes briefly. Well, we mentioned creating hydros, and you mentioned obviously Dave Moore was doing some things with that. Enzymes, I think, were sold by NutraBaits in different things. And I think, actually, talking to Dave, I'm sure I read an article of his years ago, and I think it was on might have been like a Dutch website or something weird. But I read an article of Dave's where he was talking about enzymes. Anyway, enzymes in baits added into actual boilies before boiling. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously heat destruction. I mean, can you talk about enzymes at all?
Yeah, it's not something I do anymore. I mean, we did an awful lot of things back in the late 80s, 90s that I don't deem to be relevant now. And it's not something it probably surprised you to hear. It's not something I've really pursued. I mean, it's a huge deal, but it's not something I've really pursued too much. Not in recent years, anyway. I mean, we had the Addict range, which were our first 3 products at Future that was Tim's baby. But I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, the enzyme thing is a huge thing and vitally important, but it's not something I give a great deal of thought to these days, I have to be honest.
Is that because there's a lot of pre-digested products out there, or is it just that it's just too hard?
I think a lot of the hydroslates do the job for you, probably.
Yeah.
Better than a lot of the enzymes could.
Yeah. And again, like Pete said earlier, and I'm sure Pete's got something to say on this, but like Pete said, you need such rigid environments for these enzymes to work consistently. And of course,
you do.
Different if you're making bait in your own shed, but you know, on a commercial level, if that bait turns up, like Stephen said last week, you know, if that bait turns up slightly different shade, the customer's going to be calling you every name under the fucking sun, isn't he? And moaning about it, you know. So it's tricky.
I mean, when we were using the baits with the Addicts, every time we went fishing, we used to go with 8 or 10 thermos flasks.
Yeah.
And we used to have £1.50 in old money in every thermos flask. And we'd open a thermos flask every day. I don't think that's practical now for today's carp oil. I don't.
Do you know what? I think
you don't want to be messing about like that, does it?
See, I would. I don't think that's messing
about. I know you would.
But yeah,
I know you would.
Yeah.
But I think the average guy, if you said, right, go and buy yourself 10 thermos flasks, freeze them all and open them every day, or go and buy 10 kilo of cell, I know what he's going to do.
Oh, yeah.
You know, without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely.
It's all too easy now, isn't it? I mean, that's not being critical, but it is a lot easier now.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's very easy. I mean, back on the thermos thing, I think it was, I might be wrong on this. I think it was Sean Harrison that mentioned this. We did a podcast with him. I think it was the first podcast we did with him, actually. I'm sure it was him that mentioned taking a thermos to a lake, and I might be wrong. It might be someone else. Apologies, whoever it was.
I think he has gone down that road, I think.
Yeah. What, for those people that don't know what the hell we're on about right now, what was that all about, and why did you do it?
Well, because the theory said that an enzyme-rich bait had to be used within 24 hours of the bait being made or 24 hours of it thawing out. And that the enzymes, which were an expensive part of the overall package, were totally inconsequential if you went beyond the 24 hours. So, I mean, we used to look at our watches and think, we've got to put this bait in now. And I used to think, well, might not get eaten for a day and a half.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it was all about keeping everything active. And we were convinced that you had to do that within 24 hours of the bait being thawed out. But again, in those days, if you used a couple of pounds a night of bait, you thought you were using a lot.
Yeah.
You know, there's people all over the country now who've dropped that out of the catapult and left it on the floor, isn't there? A couple of pounds. Well, there is.
Left it for the
rest. It's a different world we live in.
Yeah.
And I just don't think enough people would mess around if that's the right way. And we haven't all stopped catching carp since we stopped doing it. I mean, we used to live by it being tipped. We used to go to the mangrove with these thermos flasks, and they were all numbered, you know, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all that, you know. When I think back, God, we were making it hard. We were
just complicating it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. I mean,
yeah. unless you're using enzymes, and then obviously there's great value in doing that, but you'd need to add the enzymes after, obviously.
Yeah, and it's like that, the hydroslate thing we said about Dave Muller. For me, it's not an exact science, and it's not consistent enough for me. I like consistency in the baits I use, and I just don't get it in that respect.
Do you think that's important, consistency in what you're applying to fish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not in terms of what you're selling to the consumer now, in terms of the fish having that consistency in their feed, or what?
I think if you're trying to get a bait, I mean, obviously it's important if you're selling a bait to an end user, but I think if you're trying to establish a food bait, you want that consistency, like we just mentioned, not in terms of shape and size and things like that and buoyancy, but certainly in terms of the recipe and I'm absolutely obsessive about being every pound of bait I use is exactly the same as the next one. Absolutely obsessive.
I think I know what your answer is going to be. And I think you take a really sort of refreshingly simple approach to it all. But what do you think? I'll ask it anyway. What do you think that is? What are the carp seeing as consistent? Is it that balance of amino acids and organic acids and X, Y, or is it just the flavor notes of it? What is it you think that the carp are reading the same, or are they reading absolutely everything that's in that bait? I don't know. I think that's a shit question. We'll never know. Hopefully you know what I mean.
I've got a shit answer as well, so don't worry. because I think the easy answer is we don't know, do we?
No.
But I know with our dogs, if I get, you can tell by the biscuit that we get them, if it occasionally varies a bit. And if it varies, they're a lot more picky than they are if it's how it should be. There's no question about that. They like what they like. And I think how much a fish can tell if it's exactly the same, I don't know. There's no way we can know. I think a lot of it might be a confidence thing. To me, I need to know that the bait I'm putting out tomorrow night is the same bait I put out tonight. Exactly the same. Exactly the same in makeup, exactly the same in additives, inclusion rates of additives. And I think that's vitally important. I think the only way I like to mix it up is to mix up the things to confuse them from a catching and sort of point of view. And that is more the size, mixing up the weights of the bait sometimes. I think that can be a real biggie, not just the sizes, but the weights. You've got to keep them guessing. You've got to make them want that food, which stands to reason you want it to be identical every time.
Yeah.
But you want them to throw caution to the wind and not twig that there's a hook attached to one of them, basically.
Yeah. Do you think they can detect things like the metal hook, the hook length material, putty, things like that?
Well, people who know a lot more about these things than I do will tell you they can. I just think they can associate some things with danger. If every time I give my dog a biscuit, I smack him on the end of his nose, he'll soon get fed up with that. But if I give him 200 biscuits and then give him one and smack him on the end of the nose, he'll just keep coming back.
Yeah. I had this thought earlier when we were talking about French fish. Quite a lot of people would say they're easier, but you've got to think they're bigger, right? Generally speaking now, okay? I know you could pick holes in this, but they're generally bigger. So they're eating more baits, they're eating more freebies without getting hooked. So you know, if I mean, it doesn't work like this, but if a fish on a syndicate eats 1,000 baits and then it gets hooked once, well, if a fish abroad, you know, a bigger fish that's eating a lot of bait, if they're eating 10,000 different particles and then getting hooked, obviously it's going to be a little bit less cautious. You know, I wish there was a better way I could sum that up, but I think you know what I mean. That's got to come into
the thing, right? The thing with French fish, they vary enormously. You know, you can go to some French venues, irrespective of size of fish, depending what pressure they've had, what the stock's like, and it's like clubbing seals. You know, it is easy, so easy. And you can go to other lakes like Luke Moffitt's Lake, like Gigantica, like Dream Lakes. There's somebody in them main swims, or the prime swims, you know, COVID aside, every week of the year. You know, and I think people forget that. And that, even the toughest English water, or the most pressured English water, doesn't have somebody in every swim every week of the year. But a lot of these commercials do.
Yeah.
Or certainly anything apart from the absolute depth of the winter. But certainly if you take the main swims, I've never fished Dream Lakes, but if you take somewhere like Dream Lake or Gigantica, the hot swims will have somebody in them from Saturday to Saturday, the vast majority of weeks of the year. And they're all fishing similar spots, the spots where the bailiff suggests, or they're all doing this, they're all doing that. So them fish are very, very pressured. And they're not easy to catch. I mean, you look at Gigantica, which I've not fished, but I'd love to. Them fish are not easy to catch. The fish in Luke Moffitt's Lake are not easy to catch. But you can go to a little tang that was stocked a week last Thursday, and as I said, it's like clubbing seals. You know, there's no fun in it for me. You know, I've no desire to catch 10 fish in a night. If I can catch the type of fish I'm fishing for, if I can catch 10 in a season, I'm happy. You know, so it's there's French fish and French fish. The what I call the French stockfish tend to be very, very easy to catch. The fish in Cassienne, in Gravière, you know, they're not easy to catch. They're just not. They're very, very pressured. Been fished for by some of the best anglers in Europe for a lot of years. You know, they're not going to be easy to catch.
Yeah. Definitely. When you go abroad, or when you fish in the UK, actually, do you fish in the UK now, or is it solely abroad that you do?
I fish. The only fishing I'm doing, I'm looking to join somewhere in the UK this year, or next year, to be honest, because this COVID thing has brought home the fact that I need a few more options than what I've got. The only fishing I do in the UK is local, which, because I live up here in Rotherham, they're not particularly big fish. I'm not a member of any syndicates, but I enjoy doing an evening, doing a few days on lakes that I grew up on, you know, and I'm never gonna rewrite the record books, but I like them.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I'm trying to do at the minute, probably the closest lake to me that's of interest is about 5 or 6 miles away. It's got a handful of good 20s. It had a couple of 30s, but they've sort of sadly died. And what I'm trying to do is catch one of the fish in there that I can recognise from the album when I was a teenager. Which it's just a personal thing, you know, but I can be fishing there within half an hour of leaving home. I want 2 rods, a low chair and a flask, and I'm fishing. So that's the mainstay of my UK fishing. But I am looking to join somewhere, but quite where I don't know.
How big is that fish that you want to catch again? The size doesn't matter.
What, in this lake?
Yeah.
What well, there's no 30s in there.
No.
I mean, I think there's a handful of fish in there that I will have in my album from when I was 17, 18.
And you want to?
And I'd love to just say, oh, look at this, 26 pound, and there it was at 3.5. You know, it's just a bit of fun. But They're nice old gnarly things, and it's not easy fishing, but it's quiet, and I just like it there.
I love that
the
stuff.
thing that does it. The thing that does it for me, when I go there, it brings back a lot of memories. But the thing more than anything that brings back the memories, it's the smell of the place. It brings the memories flooding back. I fished a lake in Cheshire an awful lot in my early 20s, a lake called Lim Dam. And when the COVID first started, when we were allowed to travel, I thought, I'm going to have a run across to Lim Dam. And it was quite a public place, and you got all sorts of dropouts and that walking around it, but it was a nice lake. And there was a burger van on the road, on the dam wall. And as soon as I got out of the car, I could smell the burger van and the rhododendrons that are all the way around it. And it just brought everything back from 35 years. Just amazing.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. But I do want to join some. Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
No, I am looking to join somewhere in the UK that'll give me not a target fish, but somewhere that makes me want to go, because at the minute, most of my fishing's abroad. I love that. But the sort of lockdown and not being able to travel has brought it home that I need a couple more strings to my bow.
Yeah.
But I've got a few waters in mind, and I don't mind travelling in the UK. So that's the one good thing about fishing in Europe. Travelling 3 hours is nothing. So I don't care where in the UK it is, but I'm going to find somewhere quiet. Well, hopefully quiet.
I was going to say, you mentioned the scaly carp earlier. Cotswold Water Park, we got some scaly fish down here. It gets busy, unfortunately. You mentioned quiet, and it's bloody. I did a lot of my fishing in Cornwall for carp anyway. I grew up around here, but then I moved down, and it's different up here, and it's horrible. Busy waters. It's not fun.
One of the things I've got to be a little bit careful of. I don't mind doing these things at all. I've worked in the industry 35 years. What I dread, and I don't want to come across as being rude or antisocial, but when you see them coming up with a low chair and you think, I've got this kid all day. And it's so I've always wanted to be a field tester. You think, no,
jeez.
I'm just like a plumber. When I'm on my time, I don't want to talk about plumbing. I'm not antisocial. I'd like to think I'm not rude and I've got time for everybody. But I do have to pick a little bit where I fish, because it can be murder.
Yeah.
It really can. In Europe also, I just like my own space,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's a couple of waters over here that might fit the bill. If you're interested, let me know. I'll tell you about them. But yeah. I know what you mean. Last thing, I just find it hard to get my head around, people plotting up next to you when there's X amount of water free. Yes, I know, you want to get on the fish and stuff, but it's not all about, to me, it's not all about catching the carp. It's going and getting a little bit of solace, being out in nature and enjoying the whole experience,
I love my fishing more than I ever have done. But truthfully, I care less and less about what I catch.
Yeah, yeah.
I really do. Nobody's sort of happier than me if I can catch one of the fish that I'm after. But I used to cut myself up on the way home if I blanked. I don't do that anymore. I think as you get older and you watch people around you get older, you realise that there's a lot more in life to worry about, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and some people are on a total different end, aren't they? And I think you would refer to them as carp tigers, which I find hilarious because it sums them up really well. People that are just so bloody minded on, making that kill and, at
I
all
think it's
costs.
great. I've been there, I've done all that, but so I forget who it was. Somebody once said to me, you can catch 100 UK 40s, 10 UK 50s, and do this, never catch an imported carp, never fish abroad for a carp. It'll say nothing on your headstone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It'll never say loving father of three who never fished for an imported carp.
No.
And it matters enormously to you. Non-anglers don't give a hoot, do they?
No. Yeah, exactly.
It's a funny one. But just that's the great thing about angling for me. I mean, the stuff I write in carpology and used to write in Carp World, there's a few guys out there who I bump into and they take it all a bit seriously, what I write. The great thing about carp fishing is, you mentioned him a while ago. If you want to fish like Chris Yates, fish like Chris Yates. If you want to travel abroad after big fish like I do that. If you want to fish a busy syndicate in Britain where you're fighting for swims, do that. You're free to do it however you want. But the key is, do it how you want to do it. And that's the wonderful thing about it. I'm not being critical of anybody. I went down the lake the other week, and there was a young guy there, and he couldn't look at me. I thought there's something wrong here. I said, "You all right?" And he apologised for using a rod pod because I'd put in carpology that it should be banned. And
oh god,
honestly, and you just think you've got to be so careful. You really have, because people take it all so serious.
Yeah,
but I don't know. But no, I definitely love it more than ever, and worry less and less about what I can.
Are you still going out fairly regular?
I go abroad as often as I can. I'm quite lucky. I go 5-6 times a year. I mean, I'm in a position now. I can't always do it, depending who I go with, but it makes sense to go for a fortnight now, because obviously it saves money on transport, on ferries, on petrol, and all that. So I do that when I can, not always by any means. But as I say, I want to join somewhere in the UK so I can fish more at home, because I look forward. I count the days to my next trip abroad, and the day I stop doing that, I'll realise that I'm fishing the wrong water or something, because I get as excited now as I did when I was 16. But I do need somewhere in the UK, without a doubt.
It's just good for the soul. If angling is in your blood, I think it's good for the soul just to get away. I fished for 2.5 hours this evening. On a lovely little water, very low stock, and I'm testing some hook bait, our upcoming hook baits, which aren't the new ones to be released. These will be released in the summer, just for those that are on the waiting list for hook baits. But just to get out, sit there, listen to all the birds, soak it in. The bees are the few bits of blossom that are out on the trees, the bees are there collecting, just soaking in that side of things. It is good for the soul.
There's nothing better, is there? No, there is nothing better. I mean, I think why I originally started fishing abroad a lot was when I had NutriBaits, it ran my life for a lot of years. I'm not being critical of that, but it did. If I tried to get to Cheshire for 3 days, it never happened. If I tried to get to Kent for 4 days, it never happened. Something always came up. I always booked work first. If I booked a ferry, I booked a lake in France, or arranged with a mate of mine to go, I'd mark it on the yearly planner in my office, and I would go. And I think that's where the foreign trip started. It suited me more with work. As I say, I've got the opportunity to now to sort of do fortnights, and I could never dream of going in winter because of the exhibitions. When I had NutriBaits, we used to do, 10 exhibitions in, 8 exhibitions in 12 weekends or whatever it was. There wasn't time to do anything. Whereas now my life's a bit different, but you get other priorities. You know, I lost my dad last year. I'm watching my mum on her last legs. And you think, you know, it's only fishing at the end of the day. I love it more than ever, but it is the most important thing in my life, apart from family. There's no question about that. You know, I couldn't imagine life without it. As I said to you last time, when I was seriously sort of considering walking away from it, I sort of sat there and thought, what am I going to do? And I just couldn't imagine life without it. You know, be it 3 hours on this lake down the road or 2 weeks on a sparsely stocked big fish lake in France. I just couldn't. They're both wonderful in their own ways, and I just couldn't imagine life without that.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, it's clearly been such a massive part of your life. You know, your spare time as well as your work. It's all revolved around fishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has, but I mean, a very somebody who I respect an awful lot in the industry. We travelled abroad for an exhibition together in about 1989, 1990, something like that. And Nutribaits was just showing signs of establishing itself in the market properly. And I remember him saying to me, never ever let your fishing and work get muddled up. Always keep your fishing separate. And whilst I've done a few DVDs and stuff like that, I try not to. I try to let work stop there and my fishing start there. I mean, it's not so much of an issue now because I'm not, apart from a bit of consultancy work, I'm not working as such anymore. But I've never let the two, you know, become entwined. And although it's inevitable when you work in the fishing industry that it will happen, I've always, you know, tried to ensure it doesn't.
Yeah. The black pepper oil is an interesting one. Some people would say that it purely works off of gustation, so taste rather than actual attraction. Do you think it has its own attraction properties, or do you think it's all about taste?
No, I think it has its own attraction qualities, without a doubt. You've only got to look at the effectiveness of pink pepper pop,
which we mentioned earlier.
Which are balls of not very much at all laced with black pepper, and they love them.
They definitely do. Yeah.
Oh, they do. They do.
Yeah. Do you ever fish with particles now, or are you just strictly boilie only?
Yeah, I have done over the last couple of years quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, not huge quantities. As I say, on this water I've been fishing, it tends to be fish for a fish, and that's the way to get the big ones. So not huge quantities, but I'm a huge lover of hemp. Always have been. The carp in the lake, I'm fishing. See a little bit of maize. A lot of the Dutch guys use maize, so I have a little association with carbon baits, who do some lovely particles, and I just use their hemp and maize, or hemp maize and tears. I have used, but just hemp and maize normally. In fact, I ordered some yesterday, and I don't think, if you're looking for a particle, I don't think you could beat it. I really do.
Tears.
I don't do anything to it. Yeah, they are very much so.
Tears
very
are
much so.
Yeah.
A mate of mine, Colin McNeil, who's been my regular fishing partner for quite a lot of years. He comes from a background of more general angling, and he rates tears so highly. Really does.
Yeah.
I used hemp and tears last year. Or hemp, tears and maize. Whether it made any difference to just the hemp and maize, I don't know. But I don't like a lot of hemp, but I love a little scratch in the hemp in the swim.
Is there anything you'll do to your hemp, Bill, preparation-wise?
Well, when on my pre-carbon baits days, I used to add a little bit of Himalayan rock salt to it. But the preserved hemp that I use from carbon now that comes in the jars is preserved solely with salt and with vacuum sealing the top before you put the lid on. So that's already got a Himalayan rock salt in it. But I don't do anything with theirs now because it's got a bit of salt in it. But I don't think you have to do a lot with hemp. I really don't.
No, I know a lot of guys like to use garlic.
Yeah, they do carbon do a version of hemp garlic in it, but the further down the road I've got, I just like to try and keep things as simple as you can, because certainly when you're involved or were involved in bait like I was, you do fall into the trap of disappearing up your own arse if you're not careful. You've got access to so much stuff. And I always, when we set a new employee up, they always used to come to me, what bait do I want to be using? Well, I'd tell them. But for the first year they worked for me, it changed every 6 weeks, because they've got so many options around them. And I've always been fortunate to be in that position. But you've just got to pick what suits you and stick with it. As I keep repeating myself, but I think it's such a big deal. I mean, I'm going back to this lake as soon as I can get out there. I am using the identical tactics to what I used last trip and the trip before. I mean, them 2 trips have given me unbelievably a 69 and 370s. So why would I dream of doing anything different? Mm-hmm. Be absolute madness, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, it would be. You're right. You're discussing earlier with French lakes in particular, and a lot of these high pressured venues. Is that to people who'll be listening to this? Is there any advice you would have for somebody who's going to somewhere like Cassian, to somewhere like Gigantica, these lakes that are fished with huge amounts of pressure? Is there any advice you'd give to somebody who's going out there for the first time?
The best advice I could give, if you're going to a lake of that sort of magnitude, is just fish it like you would an English lake. Mm-hmm. There's some huge fish in there, but let's be honest, the tackle we all use these days, you can land anything with it, can't
you?
Yeah. But all this, I've got to use 100 kilos of bait in a week because I'm in France. I've got to use 24 mils because I'm in France. I've got to use size 2 hooks because I just fish it like I would fish it in England. I thought every lake's different. There's a lot of things to consider. I've got a load of crayfish that seem to follow me around from lake to lake. So I've always, the last 3 or 4 lakes I've fished seriously, I've had massive sort of crayfish problems. So I've had to bear that in mind. Do your own work. I think too many people, they go on the forums, I'm going to eat tang, whatever. And they totally change what they're doing because they go in there. And then they have a week there, then a week somewhere else. Then next year, you go to 2 other lakes. And then they moan that they've never had a big fish. If I'd just fished a week here, a week there, and a week somewhere else, I'd hardly have caught any big fish. You wouldn't expect to go to a lake in Oxford or in the Cotswolds and empty it in 1 week, would you? No. And yet people book a lake in France, don't catch a 60 and 270s. So next time they go somewhere else and start all over again. To me, and it's difficult with the lakes you have to book in advance, but I find a fish or a couple of big fish that I've got my heart set on, and I will stop there until I hopefully catch them. I'll either catch them, they'll die, or I'll get back. And I'll not get back because I tend not to break any rules. So they'll either die or I'll catch them because I won't give in and I won't move on to the next. People are looking for this easy 60, easy 70. It doesn't exist. You can get lucky. Anybody can get lucky. You can go to Oxford and get lucky, but you wouldn't expect to do well by fishing Wellington 1 week, Horseshoe 1 week, Cotswolds 1 week. you'll be very lucky to do well fishing like that.
How much time have you done on Cassian, Bill?
Never.
Okay.
Me and a pal of mine did an exhibition in France and then had an exhibition in Italy the week after. So we stopped out there and we went to Cassian for 3 days and hired a boat and had a little drift around and a sniff around. But I wished I'd gone 25, 30 years ago. I think I missed the boat.
Yeah, it's hard fishing by all accounts now, isn't it? Because it's days only. You've got to be very committed.
It's days only, pressured fish. I wish I'd fished it years ago when Rob, Bitchy and all them were on. I'd love to have fished it then, but I didn't really have the means to sort of get there in them days. It's a lake I'd like to think I'd catch a carp from before I turn my toes up, but it'll not be any time soon because I've no immediate plans.
Mm-hmm.
I try to fish and try to catch big fish that other people don't catch and where other people aren't fishing. It's difficult, but it can be done.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I know you sort of your time is precious. But last, just one from me, just purely from interest, is other anglers, Bill. Is there anybody in particular who you fished with over the years really sort of shined out to you as a particularly special angler?
There's a guy. He'll not thank me for saying it. There's a guy from Hampshire called Mark Pidgley, who I did quite a bit of fishing down in Hampshire with him in the winters quite a few years ago, and he's as good an angler as I've ever seen. There was another guy who was from Sheffield who doesn't carp fish anymore, but he was just, he was quite a bit older than me, and I met him when I was young, and he was just a terrific angler. But I think if you had to sort of pin me down, I think I would say Mark Pidgley. I mean, he taught me so much. But I mean, the biggest influence I've had in my angling life was a guy who's sadly no longer with us now from Kent called Alan Smith. And I didn't spend a lot of time with him. I ended up in France one year with him. And I met him a few times on the Tip Lake at Darren. And he took me under his wing a little bit, and he taught me so much about bait, applying bait, and the sort of mental approach. He changed my life really in terms of the way I fish for carp, and I'll never be to thank him enough. I mean, obviously, I'd love to think he was still with us, which he is, but he was just something else, absolutely something else. He just had that. He had that we were talking about earlier. Just that something special, But Mark Pidgley and Alan Smith are certainly right up there.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Some people have got it, haven't they?
Yeah, without question.
And I know I said it was going to be sort of one last before we let you go. But one final one is, I know it's something we could go down sort of rabbit holes, and we don't have the time to do that. But shelf lives in sort of modern carp bait. What's your feeling on shelf lives, and where do you think they fit in nowadays?
Well, everybody talks about shelf lives as if they're poor quality, and everybody speaks about freezer baits as if they're much better quality.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something in that, but I can make you a fabulous quality shelf life bait, and I can make you an appalling quality freezer bait. So just to say that freezer baits are better quality is nonsense, because you don't know that. So basically, what you've got to ask yourself is, does the sensible use of a low-level human-grade preservative affect that bait in a bad way? And if you think it does, stick with the freezer baits. If you think it's inconsequential, use whichever you wish. But to automatically bracket every shelf life bait as being rubbish and every freezer bait as being great is being very naive, because at the risk of repeating myself, you can make a rubbish quality freezer bait and a great quality shelf life bait. And people just look at the way they package, look at where you are. I mean, let's be honest, it's no secret. There are bait companies out there, well, I hope it's not a secret, there are bait companies out there whose freezer bait and shelf life bait is the identical product.
Yeah.
And all they do is put them in different bags. And the fact that they've got preservatives in the freezer bait means that they can export. We could never export Trigger to Russia because it'd have gone off big time it got there.
Mm-hmm.
But there are companies, it's the same thing, and yet people have way more confidence if you buy it out of a freezer.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much exclusively use my own bait. Well, that's a lie, actually.
Yeah.
It is a lie. But I'd like to, and that's a route I'm going down again. But I've certainly got more confidence, I feel, in freezer baits. And having said that, I know a couple of big firms where they just rechange the packaging, repackage it, and it's exactly the same bait. Do you have any sort of theories on its effect on aquaculture, or like on living organisms within the lake, rotting baits, for example, sitting there for weeks on end?
There's shelf lives and shelf lives. You know, I like to think the shelf lives we produced, and the RG ones, the Nutribaits ones, you know, and many other companies, I wouldn't have a care in the world. You know, if you go into mainland Europe, Eastern Europe, and you see them at these shows, and you can't sort of carry 30 quid worth of bait because you get that much, that scares the life out of me. But because you think you can't produce a good quality bait for that money, it's a physical impossibility. And yet these guys go running around shoveling them all in casting and scared the life out of me. But a shelf life bait from Mainline, from Dynamite, from Nutribaits, from RG wouldn't bother me in the slightest. Really wouldn't.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I guess in my head I've got a thing about sort of bacterial processes and
yeah. I mean, when I forget when it was, I had 10 glass jars on my office windowsill, and I'd got baits from every company, shelf life, freezer baits, and there was no pack to suggest that the shelf life, the good quality shelf life baits, weren't going to break down like the freezer baits. And yet there were some freezer baits that I think they'd still be here.
Yeah.
You know, it's very difficult. You've got, again, ask the bait company. They shouldn't have a problem answering you.
No.
You know, as I mentioned, I think in the first podcast, you can't buy rabbit food without knowing the exact contents. Why should you be able to buy carpet? You know, there's too many people, and I'm not chucking a net over Europe, but there's too many people, a lot of them in mainland Europe. As long as they can get a wheelbarrow full for a tenner, you know, they're happy as a pig in shit. That scares the life out of me. You know, literally, I would not give up my dog for all the money in the world. And yet these fish that we all supposedly love so much and care about so much and put on big padded and hooking mats, some people are happy to feed them absolute shite. And that does scare me. So, I mean, the first thing I would do is ring the bait company and say, right, tell me about your preserving techniques. If they wouldn't answer, I'll put the phone down.
I think a lot of them would. I think there's awful lot of bait companies around at the moment. Maybe a lot of the smaller ones may not even understand what they're essentially putting in a bait to preserve them.
No. But you don't have to go over the top. If you dry them properly and do it sensibly, you don't have to go over the top. You really don't.
That's it. And moisture content's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to get the moisture out. I mean, it's the same with a biscuit. You know, the only reason a biscuit don't go off is because there's no moisture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you wet them and put them back in the jar, they'll go off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know sort of time is ticking on. Sam, have you got anything you wanted to ask Bill?
So just to sum up, if I can just say one more thing, the long and short of it is, whether you're buying bait in Essex, in Rotherham, in Moscow, or there are some bait companies who care an awful lot about what they're putting into the bait and the effect it's sort of having on the environment. And just like there's good plumbers and bad plumbers, there's some bait companies who don't give a hoot, just want your money. The difficulty is sorting one out from the other.
Good note to leave on. It's very true, isn't it? And it's sad. It's sad.
Yeah, it is true. It is true.
Yeah, we said this. We said this. We touched upon this in the first episode. You know, it's. I haven't known you that well since. Well, I haven't known you at all since we started this podcast process, and we've been in touch a few times since. But all those years ago, you know, I was just a nobody, and I still am a nobody. But I phoned you up for help, and you really gave me the time of day, and you honestly, you know, answered the best that you could, helped me out the best that you could, and the passion is definitely there. And it's, I hope.
I'm always been one of those people. If I can't answer your question, I won't blag it. I'll tell you I don't know the answer.
You've done it on this podcast. You've been honest, and you've said, "Oh, well, it was like that." Actually, you know, theirs was better. Or you've been very honest. It's appreciated. I hope that lives on, and I'm sure there's other people out there like that now that are doing it, and I hope there is. But it's a nice refreshing change, and I think on this podcast platform, you know, podcasts are getting really big. I think it's a lovely refreshing change for people to hear someone that's been in the trenches, done this for a very long time, and that can actually speak with 100% honesty, which you definitely can. So yeah, thank you for that.
I think that's probably a little bit easier now. I'm not involved. I mean, you see things from the outside, and sometimes the mistakes you've made yourself, the things that other companies do right, the things that other companies do wrong. I think that's sometimes easier when the pressures of running your own business have sort of left you, you know?
Yeah, which is understandable, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, well, look, do you know what? If I was to rewind 15 years ago, I never would have dreamt that I'd be talking to you on a podcast. But here we are. Bill, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. I know so many people will listen to this and really take a note of what you said. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks very much for your support. I appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you, Bill.